All right, today we are tackling a huge idea. It comes from an author named Xiaoyang Lin, and it's a theory that tries to explain, well, pretty much everything about human progress. And let me tell you, it kicks off with a statement that's designed to make you sit up and pay attention. Yeah, wow. Conflict, war is a good thing. That's a tough one to swallow, right? It just feels instinctively wrong, maybe even a little dangerous. But before you write this whole thing off, we've got to understand that he's not talking about war in the way we usually think about it. See, this isn't about glorifying violence at all. For Lin, that quote is about a very specific kind of struggle. It's the kind of conflict that forces us as individuals to stand up for ourselves, to figure out what we actually believe in, and to finally break free from just, well, doing what we're told. So let's get into the first big concept here, the giant baby state. This is Lin's starting point, his metaphor for what he sees as the default state for a lot of human society. So what exactly is a giant baby? Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's an adult, physically grown, but mentally, not so much. There's someone who just doesn't want to make their own choices, and they definitely don't want to take responsibility for the results. It's always somebody else's fault. And according to Lin, this kind of mindset doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It flourishes in what he calls family cultures, these top-down authoritarian communities where you have a king or a boss or some other authority figure telling everyone exactly what to do. And this little story just nails the giant baby mindset. You've got this new employee, right? He messes up a task 3 times. And what's his excuse? Hey, I just did exactly what you told me to do. He's pushing all responsibility up to the boss. He's saying, my only job was to follow orders, not to think. And the boss's comeback is, well, it's brutal, but it's brilliant. Oh, you do whatever I say? Okay, go die. Why won't you? It's a shocking way to expose the truth. At some point, everyone has to take responsibility for their own actions. You can't just blindly follow orders forever. So this really lays out the 2 kinds of worlds that Lin is talking about. On one hand, you've got that top-down family culture. It's the perfect breeding ground for giant babies. Power comes from the top, you follow orders, and responsibility gets passed up the chain. But on the other hand, you have an independent community. Here, power comes from people choosing to work together, individuals make their own choices, and, this is the big one, they own the consequences. Lin argues that so much of what we see in the world today, especially with globalization bringing different cultures into contact, is really a clash between these 2 models. Okay, so that leads to the big question, right? How does a giant baby ever grow up? What does it take for a society to move from dependence to independence? Well, Lin says there are 2 key places where this transformation happens, 2 training grounds, if you will. And here they are. First up, you've got the free market. Think of it as a daily workout for making choices and dealing with the consequences. And second, you have productive conflict. That's the fight for what you believe in, for your own survival, where you're really forced to act on your own. Let's take a closer look at the market idea with this story Lin tells, the horse betting paradox. So picture this. There's a horse competition. The judges are asked to vote for which horse they think is the best. They all pick the white horse, probably because its owner is a buddy of theirs. There's no skin in the game, right? It's just a vote. But then, it's time to bet their own money. And guess what? Suddenly, every single one of them puts their cash on the black horse. Why the change? Because now it's real. The consequences are personal. That's what forces an honest decision. And that whole story boils down to this one absolutely central idea in Lin's theory. The person who has to live with the consequences, the one who bears the responsibility, should be the one making the call. Simple as that. Okay, so that brings us back to that whole conflict is good idea from the beginning. Now it starts to make a bit more sense. Lin separates conflict into 2 types. You have the king's war, where you're just a pawn, fighting for somebody else's goals. The core value there is just obedience. But then there's the dueler's war. This is a fight for you, for your own dignity, your own survival. And in that fight, the core value isn't obedience. It's your own individual will. This is the kind of conflict he argues is good, because it forces independence. So what happens next? You've got these independent individuals, shaped by the market and by conflict. What do? Well, they don't just wander around by themselves. They start to build new kinds of communities. And according to Lin, this process is like climbing a ladder, with each new type of community being a rung that lifts humanity higher. And here's what that ladder looks like. It starts with a lone, independent individual. They might create a personal shop, taking full responsibility for their own small venture. That can then evolve into a corporation.
From there, corporations join together in what he calls an architect alliance. And eventually, all of this integrates into a massive human operating system.
Now let's pause on the idea of the corporation for a second, because for Lin, this is a game-changing invention. He calls it a virtual person. Think about it. A corporation can own things, it can be held responsible, but it's not tied to the life or the weaknesses of any single human being. It's a way to institutionalize independence and responsibility and make it last.
But Lin thinks the role of the corporation has to change. Its purpose shouldn't just be to manage a bunch of giant babies, employees who just follow orders. No, he argues the great companies of the future will have a higher mission, to actively help their people grow up and become independent thinkers themselves.
Okay, so this whole ladder of evolution, from the individual to the corporation, is leading somewhere really radical. If our smaller communities are evolving, then our biggest ones, things like our nations and laws, have to evolve too. And Lin sees them as a kind of software for society, a human operating system that is long overdue for a major upgrade. And he actually lays it out like a software release history. You've got the Magna Carta as, say, version 1.0. Then the US Constitution comes along as version 2.0. The UN Charter is maybe version 2.5. He then speculates about what comes next, seeing these as messy but necessary updates. He talks about a Trump version, which he frames as a kind of system repair, reestablishing national independence before true global integration can happen. Then a Musk version that starts to really bring AI into management. And all of this is building towards the final goal, the Human Operating System, or HOS. So what would this human operating system actually look like in practice? Well, compared to today's nation-states, it's a complete revolution. Forget slow political lawmaking. In the HOS, the actual people involved, he calls them netizens, define the rules they need on the fly. And enforcement? Not police and courts, but an impartial AI. The central crime is boiled down to just one thing: infringing on someone else's freedom. And if you break that rule, you're not thrown in jail. You get your access restricted on the network, a kind of digital timeout. So in this future, the whole idea of a traditional country with its borders and politicians and endless bureaucracy, it just becomes obsolete. It fades away. What you're left with is a super efficient system where an AI enforces one single, simple rule about freedom, and communities of independent people create any other rules they need as they need them. I mean, it is a wild, radical vision, isn't it? A world managed by AI and self-organizing groups, all built on this bedrock of individual responsibility. So what do you think? Is this a blueprint for the ultimate form of human freedom? Or could it just as easily turn into some kind of high-tech tyranny? For the author, Xiaoyang Lin, our opinion on the matter doesn't really change the outcome. He argues this isn't a choice, it's just the inevitable destination at the end of a long and often very difficult journey toward independence.